What began as a simple landscaping disagreement quickly spiraled out of control. At the monthly HOA meeting, which Michael and Sarah attended hoping to resolve the issue, Eleanor publicly denounced them as problem residents who were destroying neighborhood property values. When Michael attempted to present photos of other native gardens in prestigious neighborhoods, Eleanor abruptly ended the meeting. 2 days later, Eleanor called SecureGuard, a private security company that the HOA had recently contracted for neighborhood patrols at Eleanor's insistence. The $30,000 annual expense had been controversial, but Eleanor had pushed it through, citing concerns about outside elements entering their community. She falsely reported to SecureGuard that Sarah was trespassing on community property and vandalizing the decorative flower beds at the neighborhood entrance. "She's destroying community property right now," Eleanor told the dispatcher, her voice artificially panicked. "She's been hostile before. You might need extra personnel." The security company, eager to impress their new high-paying client, dispatched 2 guards and their recently acquired K-9 unit to the Jenkins home. It was Saturday afternoon, and Sarah was kneeling in her garden, installing a small decorative stone border, completely unaware of the approaching confrontation. The security SUV screeched to a halt at the curb. 2 men in black uniforms with SECUREGURP emblazoned across their backs approached rapidly. One of them, a muscular man with a shaved head, had a German shepherd straining at its leash. "Ma'am, we need to see some identification immediately," the second guard demanded, hand resting on his taser. "We've received reports of vandalism and trespassing." Sarah stood slowly, soil still clinging to her gardening gloves. "There must be some mistake. This is my property. According to HOA President Thornhill, you're in violation of community rules and have been warned repeatedly," the guard with the dog said. "We need you to come with us to discuss this with the board president." When Sarah refused, pointing out that she was on her own property and had broken no laws, the guard's demeanor darkened. "Ma'am, either you comply or we'll consider you hostile." The dog is trained to subdue non-compliant individuals. By this point, neighbors had begun emerging from their homes. Across the street, Diane Miller, a retired history teacher, began recording with her phone. Next door, the Rodriguez family stepped onto their porch, Mr. Rodriguez already dialing Michael's number. "This is insane," Sarah said, voice shaking but resolute. "You have no authority to threaten me with a dog on my own property. I'm not going anywhere." The K-9 handler shortened his grip on the leash. "Last warning, ma'am." Michael was in the middle of a client meeting when his phone buzzed repeatedly. Seeing 5 missed calls from his neighbor Pablo Rodriguez, he excused himself and stepped into the hallway. "Michael, get home now," Pablo said urgently. "Security guards are threatening your wife with a dog. They're saying they'll remove her from your property if she doesn't comply with some HOA demand." Michael's blood ran cold. "I'm 20 minutes away. Call the police. Tell them private security is threatening my wife." As he rushed to his car, Michael made another call to his father. Chief James Jenkins had served as the county's top law enforcement officer for 15 years, earning respect for his integrity and no-nonsense approach to justice. He was having lunch with the mayor when his phone rang. "Dad, Sarah's in trouble," Michael explained quickly. "The HOA hired some security company that's threatening her with a K-9 unit on our own property. I'm driving home now, but—" "I'm closer," Chief Jenkins interrupted, already signaling for the check. "I'll handle it." At the Jenkins home, the standoff continued. The security guards, growing increasingly frustrated with Sarah's refusal to comply, hadn't noticed the small crowd of neighbors gathering at a distance, nor the multiple phones recording the confrontation. "This is your final warning," the K-9 handler said, unclipping a secondary safety strap from the dog's harness. "Either you come with us to speak with Ms. Thornhill, or we'll consider you hostile." Sarah's hands trembled, but her voice remained steady. "I'm not leaving my property. What you're doing is illegal." The wail of a siren cut through the tension. A police cruiser with county sheriff markings pulled up sharply, lights flashing. The security guards exchanged nervous glances as Chief Jenkins stepped out, his uniform crisp and authoritative, 6'2" frame, imposing even from a distance. "What's happening here?" Chief Jenkins asked, voice calm, but carrying the weight of authority that came from decades in law enforcement. "Sir, we're handling an HOA violation," the guard without the dog responded, standing straighter. "Just doing our job." "Your job includes threatening private citizens with police dogs on their own property?" Chief Jenkins asked, approaching slowly and deliberately. "We have authorization from." "You have authorization from no one with actual legal authority," Chief Jenkins interrupted, now close enough that both guards could read his name tag and rank. "I'm Chief Jenkins, County Police. That woman you're threatening is my daughter-in-law. But even if she weren't, what you're doing constitutes criminal intimidation and possibly assault." The color drained from both guards' faces. The dog handler immediately pulled the German Shepherd back, loosening its lead. "We were told she was vandalizing community property," the first guard stammered. "Does this look like community property to you?" Chief Jenkins gestured to the clearly marked property line. "And does gardening look like vandalism? You gentlemen need to stand down immediately before you find yourselves facing serious charges." Eleanor, who had been watching from her car parked down the street, suddenly found herself confronted with a situation spinning rapidly beyond her control. By evening, cell phone footage of the confrontation had spread throughout the community and reached local news outlets. The headline, "Police Chief Intervenes in HOA Overreach," appeared on the evening news, accompanied by interviews with shocked neighbors. "They threatened this sweet woman with a dog because she planted flowers," said Diane Miller, the retired teacher whose video had gone viral locally. "I've lived here 15 years, and I've never seen anything so outrageous." The following morning, the CEO of Securiguard held an emergency press conference. "The actions taken by our employees were completely unauthorized and against company policy," he stated nervously. "We've terminated both individuals involved and are conducting a full review of our protocols." By afternoon, the company had canceled their contract with Oakwood Estates, refunded the annual fee, and issued a formal apology to the Jenkins family. Eleanor Thornhill suddenly found herself facing consequences. Anonymous sources leaked emails showing she had misrepresented Sarah's actions to the security company and had previously discussed with board members how to make life difficult for non-conforming residents. When 3 board members resigned in protest, homeowners called for an emergency community meeting. The community center was packed beyond capacity that Friday evening. One by one, residents stood to share their own experiences with Eleanor's heavy-handed enforcement, from citations for trash cans left out an hour too long to fines for children's basketball hoops. Michael and Sarah, sitting quietly in the back, were surprised by the outpouring of support. "The board hereby votes to revise our landscaping guidelines to explicitly permit native plant gardens," announced the interim board president to thunderous applause. "Furthermore, we're implementing a new system requiring at least 3 board members to approve any enforcement action." In the weeks that followed, Michael and Sarah became reluctant community advocates. With guidance from Chief Jenkins, they organized a neighborhood workshop on understanding HOA authority and homeowner rights. More than 60 residents attended. HOAs serve an important purpose in maintaining community standards, Chief Jenkins explained to the attentive crowd. But they're not above the law, and they must respect constitutional rights and property boundaries. Sarah's garden flourished throughout the summer, attracting beneficial insects and birds. The city's Environmental Commission visited to present her with their annual Sustainable Landscape Award, bringing positive press coverage to Oakwood Estates. Eleanor eventually sold her house and moved to a gated community in the next county. Before leaving, she stopped by the Jenkins home unexpectedly one evening. "Your garden," she said stiffly to Sarah, who had answered the door. "It's not what I would choose, but it's well maintained." It was as close to an apology as she could manage. The following spring, 5 more native gardens appeared in Oakwood Estates. The new HOA newsletter, edited by Michael, featured a monthly sustainable gardening column written by Sarah, who had found unexpected purpose in her new community role as environmental advocate. A silver lining to what had begun as a neighborhood nightmare. #HOA sent K-9 unit after my wife. They didn't know my dad is the chief of police. Part 1. The garden dispute. Michael and Sarah Jenkins had just moved into Oakwood Estates, an upscale suburban neighborhood with immaculate lawns and strict community guidelines. After saving for 5 years, they had finally purchased their dream home. A charming colonial with a spacious yard that Sarah, an avid gardener with a degree in environmental science, couldn't wait to transform. During their home buying process, Sarah had meticulously reviewed the HOA rulebook. The landscaping section only specified maintained landscapes that enhance neighborhood aesthetic, with no explicit prohibitions against native plants. Feeling confident, Sarah began replacing portions of their front lawn with a thoughtfully designed native plant garden, complete with black-eyed Susans, purple coneflowers, and little bluestem grasses, all carefully arranged in attractive patterns. 3 weeks into their residency, while Sarah was watering her newly established garden beds, a shadow fell across the lawn. Eleanor Thornhill, the HOA president, stood at the edge of their property with her arms crossed and lips pursed into a thin line. "Mrs. Jenkins, I don't recall the board approving these modifications," Eleanor said, gesturing dismissively at the flowering plants that were already attracting butterflies and bees. Sarah smiled, extending a soil-covered hand, which Eleanor pointedly ignored. "I checked the guidelines before planting. These are all native species that support local wildlife and actually require far less water than traditional lawns." The next morning, a neon pink violation notice was stuck to their mailbox. Over the following week, the notices became increasingly threatening, with Eleanor citing vague references to community standards and uniform appearance expectations that weren't actually written in the HOA documentation. Sarah attempted to schedule a meeting with the board to discuss the benefits of native landscaping, reduced water usage, elimination of fertilizer runoff, and habitat creation, but Eleanor repeatedly cancelled. The situation reached a breaking point when Michael found a certified letter in their mailbox containing a $500 fine for deliberate violation of aesthetic standards and refusal to comply with verbal warnings. That evening, as they sat at their kitchen table staring at the fine notice, Michael's jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous," he said, pulling out the HOA handbook. "There's nothing in here prohibiting native plants, and they can't just make up rules. We're not paying this." Sarah nodded, though her stomach knotted with anxiety. She loved their new home, but hadn't expected to become embroiled in a neighborhood battle so quickly. "Maybe I should just replant with traditional flowers." "No," Michael said firmly. "Your garden is beautiful, legal, and better for the environment. We're standing our ground on this."